Hello. How fun is this to be able to spend time together here on the You've Got Nurse Series podcast? This is a place to explore practical ways to improve our health, which heightens our life experience. I invite you to join in with an open heart and an open mind to receive our guest today. I am so excited to introduce to you Ama Mathewos. She is a certified coach and she is a board certified advanced nurse executive. And so, Ama, thank you so much for spending time with me today and everybody else. And please let us know, give us an idea of how you got to where you are now and what is an advanced nurse executive.
Sure. Thank you for having me and spreading your light and sharing it with me and all your listeners. And that's kind of why I got into this, wanting to share what I know is really important and meaningful in human connection, which is the work that we do in nursing, and more specifically in the work of how we show up as professionals and specifically leaders, nurse leaders, how they show up and how organizations show up for them is really important because leaders really impact, the employees as well as then the patients, right? And so I got into being a leader. My interest grew more and more of not just providing clinical care to patients, wanting to work on committees or do quality improvement projects. And then that expanded to kind of working and going from clinical to like a split clinical administrative role. And when I graduated being a nurse manager, an internal recruiter had to call me like 3 times. It was like, don't you want to be a nurse manager? And I was like, no, that is such stressful work. Why would I want to do that? And the big thing that stuck out to me was managing the schedule and people's attitudes in general. And I was like, no, thank you. And so she was very persuasive and talked about things that I said that I'm interested in, things that clearly I kind of enjoyed and was good at doing, and what my future goals were. She painted this, again, persuasive picture that I should kind of explore being a nurse manager. And I went and I did it, or I went to interview. I said, at least interview. And I ended up getting the role, not the role I went there for, a much bigger and maybe harder one. But it was the right fit for me, or I was so glad because this team was, just the most amazing team. And the first 2 years were really hard. It's a huge learning curve to go from not managing people or the operations of a unit to then being handed keys and responsibility to be over a 24/7 area, 65 employees, a huge budget and all the things that come with that. So the first year was rough. The second year was tough and then it got better. But during that time, what did I realize? I needed to learn a lot, and what I needed to learn to feel confident in working effectively with my team there was no manager orientation that did that within the hospital. And there weren't even really a lot of readily accessible, information and support for nurse leaders or how to master kind of being a nurse manager. And so I had to kind of piece that together. And then I built my own kind of mentoring or networking. And so I figured it out. And once I got through that, I often was like the preceptor for other nurse leaders. And so that's one piece of the story, and I'll come back to it. And then the other piece was I was a manager, and the first year was tough. And I was like, just get through the first year and you can go find another job. And I was like, maybe I should do 2 years to really like get some results. And then after that, I was like, I've done all this hard work. I love these people. I'm going to like stay the course. I'm not handing this over to anyone. And I want to, and so I stayed. And so I was a nurse manager for 6 years. And we went from kind of this post-merger, a lot of people in distress, culture, being acquired, losing yet another manager. I'm a new manager. Environment to being a magnet designated site or hospital. And so, rags to riches story. But in that, when reflecting back, things that I thought like, oh, wow, why is there such a big gap in leadership development? Oh, wow, why don't we spend more time teaching people social skills and, how to stay cool and calm in stressful environments, because every day is so dynamic and stressful in healthcare. And so I had these thoughts and like, why aren't we doing something about it? So I did that work and tried to close those gaps within my unit and the department or campus. But as more time went by to like that 6-year mark post pandemic, it became very clear to me that I want to do culture work, and I want to help close the gap with leadership support and development and professional development in general. And that's the other piece. When I continued, people were like, I can't believe you're a nurse manager for so long. 6 years nowadays seems like a really long time. And I was like, I loved it. If I could like hand the chaotic operations piece over to people, I would have stayed in it, because I love the people management part and mainly the professional development piece. People really just need somebody to listen to them, see their strengths, and guide them, them finding who they are and what they're great at. And so, I really leaned into that. It bared fruit for the team. It bared fruit for our patients, and just these individuals went on to eventually get promoted or grew within their role. And we had great retention. And so all of these little things kind of added up. And I, at the end of the 6 years, I was just like, I'm very clear. I want to work and do the work related to improving culture, helping people strengthen their emotional intelligence, and kind of being that trusted kind of advisor, support, or coach to the nursing profession, specifically leaders. But it all applies, because we all need to be our own self-leader. So it doesn't have to, though my specific audience, I guess, is or clients or nurse leaders, but it applies to everyone. Mm-hmm. And so I set out to just make that my kind of primary work. And from the nurse manager role, I went into a nurse manager, director of nursing role to help with culture change, creating a culture of excellence. And then in March in 2023, I really went all in and started a business on nurse leadership coaching, nurse leadership development and coaching, and it centering the things that I value the most, which is seeing that if you can get emotional mastery, like your emotional intelligence up, if you could have someone, help you be accountable and set goals and build on your strengths and your interests, you're going to be successful. And then in turn, that's just a ripple effect of where you're showing up and who you're touching. And so I created a company called Evolve Lead Succeed. And that's either one-on-one coaching, group coaching, doing workshops or presentations that all are related to, showing up and being your best self as a leader. And so there's the stuff that I think we commonly do in nursing, which is go to conferences, get certified, which I'll answer that question about my certification, go back for more degrees and maybe more certifications. And no dig on that, but that alone, there are many people who have the alphabet soup behind their name, and they don't really have the skills of the education they had. And I think, or what I know to be true, is that why I'm passionate about the coaching piece is that I focus on giving you the skills. So we're going to talk through how to have this tough conversation, or how to stay regulated and not have the conversation and know, do that scan or be self-aware and say, I hear you. Let's find time next week to do it, so we're both calm, and you don't even have to say so we're both calm, or you could, but really teaching leaders about themselves, how to manage themselves, and then ultimately their teams. And so that's the work I'm passionate about. I've even, in just these it's going to be 2 years in March. Over these 2 years, I've gotten more clear and almost more courageous too, of not just thinking about what hospitals want to spend money on, which is nurse retention, which is important, but also bringing up the piece that emotionally intelligent leaders and leaders who have proper support, their well-being is just important just for their well-being. And so this needs to be done because this is the support nurse leaders need, because they're important, not because of that they're going to drive outcomes for the organization or drive, for the staff, but it's something that they need. Like I submitted an abstract, it didn't get accepted, but the meat of it, or the title of it, summarizes this point that I believe in, is that we're humans first, and then we're nurse leaders second. And there's a movement now to focus on, the pandemic highlighted all the well-being and development support that clinical nurses need. I think as we're a little bit further out from that, we're seeing a shift to really give support both with functional skills and like well-being skills and holistic skills to nurse leaders too.
It's important to develop those life skills, right?
Yes. Yeah.
That's really the basis of all of it.
Yeah.
Regardless of what position you're in. And I love what you're doing, because it makes a huge difference in how everyone operates. And what a beautiful example, right? Because when the leadership is not really leadership and not setting that good example, and the ripple effect of that, as you say, just permeates everything. And I love it. I've been including in my writing and in my email signature for years, give a ripple, right?
Yeah, I love that.
Because you absolutely want to be, that person that people can talk to, that people can learn from, and also understand that we're learning all the time too.
That's right. I had one of my nurses, one of my old nurses from my team, continue to push herself and grow in the role, and then ultimately took a promotional opportunity, continue to grow. So when she finally got to the promotional opportunity where she had people reporting to her, she messaged me. She was like, "Oh my God, I just want to say thank you for how open your door was." And she was like, my employees keep coming to talk to me, and all I keep thinking about is like, I have work to do. Get out. She's like, and you never made me feel that, you never made us feel that way. And, I reassured her. I was like, I know those tasks feel very important and urgent, and some of them are. I was like, but why I did that was like, you guys were important to me, and whatever was important to you and you needed to talk through, or even just to connect, because now that means we both just are building trust and connecting, and we'll know each other and can show up for each other in both ways. And it was in both ways. As I just say that, I honestly just got chills thinking about the times that they were able to come in and know when I needed something, or say, hey, how can we help? Or, knew something personal was going on and remembered and came and celebrated that with me with like a note or something. And so that connection piece and really, I think needs to be stressed to leaders. We want sometimes we like talk about how nurses don't make time to talk to patients. And I'm like, well, they have all these tasks, and we haven't set up even sometimes the environment. Where will they sit to chat with the patient, or, and so I think we have to bring that goal as a priority, as well as like the support, how to have these conversations, where are we having them, and allowing for space for these conversations as far as like workload, like thinking about that as important work, if you will, in your day.
Well, it's fascinating how important the environment is. And in some clinical environments, it's not very receptive to the conversation that you're talking about, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, whoa. And when you really look around at that, it's just like, okay. And it's not that difficult to make those changes.
Yeah. Yeah. It just needs to be a priority. It just needs to be something you want to go after. Right. And then I want to answer your question about my certification. So I got certified. So being certified is deemed as one of those, important milestones, I think, in your professional development. And when I was, there are clinical certifications you can have. I worked in med-surg and I worked in oncology. And at that time, it wasn't a part of the culture of the organization's expectations when I was in a clinical role. So I just kind of I didn't do it. It wasn't like something that was really expected. I didn't know much of it as a new clinical nurse. And then, but by the time I made it into a leadership role, I understood the importance of it. And so it shows your kind of like commitment, your credibility from a validated like third party. And so I went for, I was ambitious. I went for the advanced first, like I skipped the first one. And, you have to study for it. You have to have so many hours you have to have the experience. It's an ANCC certification. And so it also role models at this point when I was a leader too, it was very much the expectation. If you've been in a role for at least 2 years, you should start thinking about being clinically certified or finding a certification in something that you want. And it does give a level of expertise. I think it's also a really great way to learn and grow in place. I think sometimes people think the only way to learn or to grow is to like find a title promotion. And so it's a stretch goal to achieve while not having to find a whole new job. And I'm very big on, suggesting that to people. It's not, you don't always have to like find a new specialty or work somewhere. You can grow within your own department. And so that's why I got certified. And you have to maintain it, keeping up with your CEs, and submitting them timely and such.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting too that you talk about growing in place, right? Because it's possible anywhere, I believe.
Yeah.
Right. And it brings to mind one of my favorite sayings from Wayne Dyer, right? When you the way you look at things, the things you look at change, right?
Yeah.
And as we grow, our perception and our perspectives change. Yeah. And invites different reactions and different responses from, other people in our environment. And we see different opportunities, right?
Right. And that goes back to, Catherine, like what I think is so important and why leaders should be taught for themselves, the emotional intelligence piece. But then a part of emotional intelligence, right, is relationship management and having those interpersonal skills and being situationally aware. And so I often say, like, let's unlock your superpower. And I do think it's a professional superpower, your emotional intelligence, because you're kind of like doing Jedi stuff, right? Like I'm assessing myself, the situation, and I'm coming up with a real time, response. And that takes practice. But what, oh goodness, you said, I lost my thought saying that, wanting to go back to, the coaching piece of like, yes. And why I focus on emotional intelligence, because knowing people's strengths is what we're talking about, or your own strengths and somebody else's. And so when I first came on, people were like, you know what, this is going to be my 15 manager. I'm lost. So there's a mass exodus of staff. And it had nothing to do with me. And because of my emotional intelligence, I didn't take it personal. I supported all their transitions. It was very painful because our staffing went down. And some of these people, because of that, it was very short-lived that they were on my unit. They transferred within the hospital. People thought they worked for me for years, but they were in other departments. They would come up and I still nurtured that relationship in them as a professional, and they would come and get advice or I would check in with them. But as I recruited, so that's like one piece, staying regulated and not taking things personal and being able to have that empathy and perspective. I get it. You're like, I don't want to meet yet another manager in this same unit. I'm out. I didn't take that personal. And then I had to help give people, they would joke, but words are powerful. They'd be like, oh, here goes another trader. I'm like, no, they're interested in growing, exploring something else. And just that skill of growing in place or knowing what people's strengths are. Where was I going with that? So I had to hire a bunch of new grads, which when people say, oh, I don't want to hire another new grad, that was like kind of my favorite thing to do. They're so open to learning and versus kind of undoing, behaviors or ideas that maybe were allowed in other organizations or mindsets and practice. But the unit might have been like a third of new grads at this point. I mean, when I say a lot of people left and we had to open up some new positions, and they all stayed literally 90% of them stayed for 4 years or more, and that's unheard of. And it was because I really attribute it to getting to know each one of them and coaching them for their strengths. So some went on to lead committees. Some immediately wanted to, like the 2-year mark, get certified. Others were like brand new charge nurses that were just amazing at juggling it all. Some were great preceptors, even very, so I really tapped into what their strengths were, and they were just growing and blossoming in place, and they weren't leaving. I left many of them there when it was when I parted ways. One of the new grads, who I guess she might have been entering in definitely year 4, could have been her 5th, maybe year 4. She was a part of the succession planning, and she became the nurse manager, and did that successfully because I focused on developing the team's emotional maturity as well, or intelligence. And so they were able to then start doing that with each other and our patients. And so I think that played a big part in like well-being, the engagement piece. And so then that through line of like what my journey was like, it became, the research supported it, but it became very like clear, and I became confident in one, I've walked the walk, and I've seen it in action. I believe in it. There's a gap, and I want to help close it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's wonderful to focus on those strong suits, right?
Yeah.
Because that's what, people get really, influenced, right?
Yeah.
And what's, I don't know if you're familiar with Ryan Nemec's work.
No.
The character strengths, and it's very much, he has a survey, it's character.org, I believe.
Okay.
And I'll double check that, but it's Ryan Nemec. And,
okay.
Right. And it's very much about, realizing through this survey what your top character strengths are.
Yeah. Yeah.
And when you work with those, then the other ones automatically come along with them, when the boat goes up with the tide, everything comes up, right?
That's right. That's right.
Right. And it's fascinating when people take that survey and they're like, oh, I didn't even realize that about myself, right?
Yeah.
Or if you do it in a group, it's just like, oh, well, we knew that about you, Sally, all the time, right?
Yep. Can I tell you about it also, so the piece that is just coaching, and that is really, it shouldn't be. And Phyllis, who introduced us, said this to me when I reached out to her. She was just like, this is still pioneering work in nursing, right? Like there's been professional coaching for years. The big companies, consulting companies, they have like just coaching built in, because from a business perspective, the return on the investment is just so obvious.
Right.
And that really just blew my mind. And for a long time, I was just like, I can't believe healthcare is like just missing this moment to have more people in place. And I had these thoughts even pre-pandemic to just really coach up clinical skills, the process skills, like, if you just added a few more experts that can really give feedback, right? Like a manager can't do that to that degree in all the levels and all the different ways that staff needs support. And so that just used to just drive me nuts. But I think what I'm starting to see in this post-pandemic phase is healthcare organizations are actually hiring leadership coaches. There's still, it's a step in the right direction, but you have one coach for, depending on how big the system is. But it's important because you need somebody to say, maybe just think of that as you're talking about the character strength of, you need someone to like take a step back and think about how we really show up as individuals at work and how we function as a team, and to honor each one of those and come up with a way that we can move forward in a productive way. Because we can, right? Like you don't want a bunch of the same type of people on the team because you're going to have blind spots and miss things. And so I had this really interesting opportunity to see the power of having these assessments done with a whole team. My first day of taking the nurse manager job, I showed up. It was literally my first day. The nursing leadership team was meeting with a consultant to go over their results from, something like disc. And so it was color coordinated, and it was like, well, if Ama's blue, she likes to do things in groups and is, the calm, level-headed person. But when she's stressed, she, based on how I, whatever, I go to like green or yellow, and everybody got to do that. And so I was like, wow, this is like a beautiful cheat code. My first day of work, I'm like, oh, I'm like reading everybody's like FBI profile to like really understand who they are. But that stuck with us, where it helped escalate things. It just, we were like, our boss, she was a blue, but when she went to red, we knew, and we would say that we're like, don't go there, JP's in red, like, don't do it. And so it helped us like, hey, I know you want to be real red about this right now, but it just gave us a way to connect and understand each other, and move forward without it being so, which normally would, I think, be decisive, right? Like the reds would be like, why don't we just like run towards the fire? Like, why does blue want to stop and assess first and then go get the water, and we got to like joke and reference that and talk about it, and then appreciate each other's strengths. And I thought, why can't we all have this all the time? And that was another moment for me that was like really powerful about doing these individual strength kind of testing or, validated tools to help the individual, and then definitely to help the team. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so I'm a big believer in those. I'm a DISC certified practitioner. And so DISC does that as well.
Mm-hmm. Which is great, because it allows everybody, when you think of all of this on an energetic level, and when you think about being able to utilize the humor. Oh, she's in red. Don't go there, right? You have a common language. You have, common goals, obviously.
Right.
And with a little bit of humor and a little bit of expansion, the energy level is so much further up that you're totally going to have better outcomes.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. And so that was it. I'm like, this is so obvious that you're like that. What's missing, or what could be such the great fix? And then I'll say that just drove me nuts that people, organizations wouldn't buy into it. And I also knew that nurse leaders were so key in course correcting when something was wrong within an organization, and definitely within the profession. And there was a time, I'd probably say things were still very funky from the pandemic. So like 21, 22, I was like, maybe I just need to leave the profession. And I felt bad saying that, but I always also knew I would never stop being a nurse. And so, that reframe of how can I use what I want for nursing in a different way. We're in an environment that will move at the pace and interest that, at the pace and on the track that I want to go, or like what I think is important. And I think that's how I ended up being able to, or inspired me to start my business, because I was like, well, when those moments of, if not you, then who type of thing. And so I was able to re-engage with new levels of energy and purpose in the profession, when just kind of owning what I want to help improve the profession with. And it was interesting, because I would encourage other people to do that, like, right, all the time, find your thing and like go all in, like, you don't have to like be an expert in everything, or you don't have to try to fix the whole profession. If we all find our thing and we're working towards that, back to we'll all be lifted. And so, I think that's also another way to answer the question of like, how did I get here?
Mm-hmm. And don't you think the majority of nurses are coaches? We're coaching patients and clients all the time, and we're just way more than just clinical skills. Right?
Oh my God, you're absolutely right. Right, like the nursing is known as having, being the art and science, right, of nursing. And so, yes, we do that full assessment of holistically, and we tailor our interventions to the specific person. So you're absolutely right. We're coaches to our patients. We're facilitators, right? We're like at the middle of everything. So we have to know how to connect effectively with the social worker, the pharmacist, the provider, consolidate all of that, connect them, And so nurses are so powerful and so impactful in their work. And I love that you brought that up, because it is another important message that I think needs to be said. And I don't even think to nursing, because I think we're like best kept secret of like knowing how to do all the things. I think people in other outside of the profession really need to understand, like if you get a nurse on your team, you're going to see like 100% return on investment on that. And I've heard people say that. Like I have a dear friend who's in HR, and she's like, oh my God, every time we hire someone with a nursing background, they are just, there's things we don't even have to teach them, or that they tell us about blind spots. And I was like, those are our core assessment skills, and we're people centered. But we also are, have that scientific mind and can be analytical. And so, yeah, it's a beautiful profession to be a part of.
I think so too. And I think that what's fascinating is that not everybody sees a nurse that way, right?
Right. Yeah.
And so when we don't actually use the emotional intelligence that we have, it kind of brings me to, what you tolerate is what you teach.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think it's important for some of us to do a better job of teaching people how to treat us.
Yeah.
Right?
Absolutely. It is. We have to expect more from our organizations, from other professions. I definitely have signed the petition and shared some of the work that it's more than Mary and Leary, but there's a group that is pushing for nursing to be considered STEM at the federal level. And this has so many implications related to funding and support from the federal level. It will also help with nurses who are doing research work, education support when you're going to get your PhD. It'll be such a game changer. And it's like, really, we had to wait and still are like fighting for it in 2025 to prove that we are a part. You think we had to take chemistry, biology, like what? But, finally it's like, I think nurses are really rising to the occasion and aren't waiting. We're we've always, oh gosh, I have to tell you about this. The ANA has an innovation arm, and they are a small and mighty team. And every time I hear them speak, I feel inspired and moved. And it's that shift in perspective. It's expecting more. It's not letting people label us. And so the first talk that really just like pulled me into their work was the keynote. She was given a presentation at Magnet. Her name is Olivia. And she just laid out all the innovations that nurses have done. And she said, but we have to stop calling them workarounds, or that we're rigging things, or that, like this is our intellectual property, and she named things I had no idea nurses were the ones who invented, and our name isn't on it. If you think about, you get the pap smear, it's very clear. A doctor created that. And so we've missed these opportunities, but there is this big push for nurses to embrace being innovators because we are, but stepping into that power and elevating our language and how we're showing up in rooms. And you're seeing nurses getting space at these like health tech conferences where we normally were absent. So there is this big push, I think, happening for us to own our full power and impact. But everybody does need to rise to the occasion, and we're not all doing that. So I love that you brought up that point to say, what you tolerate is what you'll get. We have to start expecting more.
I think so too. A friend of mine, she was so funny. I used to work with her quite a bit. And one day she looked at me and she says, Catherine, I think you were born with a tool belt on.
I love that.
I know. Right?
It's so true. And, I think we're, for some people it's innate. And then other people, like when you go through this profession and you're at the bedside with someone, or, so you're just put in the place to like meet the need of the situation or person. And we're MacGyvers in that way, have to pull out the tool belt and think about ways to fix something, optimize it, enhance it for the situation at hand. And I think we do it so much, we don't even think that it's like a skill.
Right. I know.
Yeah.
It's a way of life, right?
It's just a way of life. Yeah. But yeah, we definitely need to start embracing that more and owning it and not giving away our intellectual property or no longer, I think, especially when in more traditional sense of like thinking about healthcare, of like not putting ourselves out there to be on committees or meetings and speaking up because, we're intimidated. It takes practice. I get it. All cultures are not like warm and fuzzy, but just take the first step and speak up. Yeah.
That's really funny. So I'm a big proponent and a big encourager of self-care. And I believe that self-care starts on the inside, and it's not the commercialized version of self-care. I mean, some of those things are nice, but that's not really what gets us going, right?
Yes.
And so what are some of the things that you do for self-care for you?
I think most important is making the time to have downtime. And it can be just a moment to reset. So mindfulness, right? To focus, to reflect, to meditate on the purpose of the day, or so just that's like my go-to self-care. And I do that because it helps me go inward, like with that pause. And there's different ways to pause. It could be take the day off. It could be I'm just stepping away from this project because I can feel. So, right, like I'm not happy, I'm sleepy, or whatever. And so self-care to me is really being in tune with how I'm feeling and aligning my actions with that. And so that is something that's really important, I think, in our fast-paced work, in our roles in general. Something that I I've kind of always done. I'm a very self-aware person. And so I would respond and meet my needs. But I will say that when I have two little kids, a 3 and just a month away from being a 6-year-old. And when you have so many people needing you, right? Like I'm married, all of that, it has tested my consistency to turn off, to turn in, to find quiet, and whatever that quiet, and in that moment, it informs me. You need to delegate. You just need to go to sleep. You need the nap. You need to ask for help, whatever it is, right? Like, and so that is my go-to form of self-care that I think is most important and sustainable, because it helps calm the body and mind, which brings you clarity to act in the best way for you in that moment.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And when you do that, you invite all of your systems, right?
Yeah.
to work in that symphony, right?
Yeah.
Which is beautiful. Beautiful. We could talk all day.
I know. and so I love that question, because we all should have a self-care answer. I love how you framed it, that like, and you're talking about like, not your preferred spa treatment, right? And that is a physical form of self-care, or can make you feel good in the health and beauty way. But with coaching and with emotional intelligence, that's where you have to start, right? Is that self-awareness piece. And I am no longer, my mind isn't fully blown, but it still is just, it surprises me sometimes when I ask someone, can you describe what you want or what you're thinking or how you're feeling in this? Or what do you enjoy or some of these self-reflective questions, people can't, because they're like, we're just on autopilot and going. And so for, if your motivation, if you're listening, is to become better at work, right? Like, or more effective at work, or to show up better, more calmly, start with your self-awareness and your reflection. And it doesn't always have to also, doesn't mean go to yoga. It means, turn things off, and really answer questions. What are your goals? Really start with your values, is often, and when you do that, that alignment shows up of are your actions aligning with your values? And then how do you close that gap if it's not? What changes do you need to make? And so I think of that as self-care, and that is how I look at mindfulness as just so key to our development and well-being in general.
Mm-hmm. That's beautiful. You're very succinct in making that so easy to understand, right? And because it's important that way. I want people to know how to find you, and your information will be posted, but I also want you to articulate it so the people that are just listening to the audio will hear it.
Perfect. Well, thank you. So you can find me, my socials where I'm most active is on LinkedIn. So you look up Ama Mathewos. That's AMAMATHEWOS. So you'll find me on LinkedIn that way. I have a website. It's evolveleadsucceed.com. And finally, if you want to send me an email, feel free to send me an email at AMA at evolveleadsucceed.com.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Anybody would be well served to get in touch with you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for creating this space. Thank you for doing the work that you do. I the sunshine and the light, I think is so important for our own energy. And then the ripple, be the ripple. I love that. I might steal that from you.
Yeah. Give a ripple.
Give a ripple. Right.
Yeah. You could use be the ripple. You could use give a ripple.
Give a ripple. That's right. Yours was give a ripple. I like that.
Yeah. It's all good. I think it's so important to be a fun one, right?
Yes. Oh, so I love that you said that. When people ask, how do I describe myself as a leader, especially when I would interview, or just how I would just self-describe, they probably wouldn't. Sometimes they would ask, what is it like to work here? And I used to say this definitely as a nurse manager. I haven't pulled this one out, but I do believe in my company's values, having fun is listed there. And I think I changed it from fun to joy, but I've worked in very tough conditions and had stressful days, as many people have. And I just choose fun and joy, even on those hard days. And it just makes it so much better. But I would tell people all the time, I was like, I'm a fun, fair, and firm leader. And meaning, if I break that down, that is joy. We can have fun. Let's play. Fair is equity for everyone, the team, the patients. I'm always going to follow my moral compass. And firm is we're going to hold boundaries that include respect, following rules and practice, back to also being fair. People think of accountability as a bad thing, but it helps really keep us all on track, and be accountable to ourselves and then everyone else. So that used to be my tagline: fun, fair, and firm.
Oh, that's really good.
But leading with fun. I want you to show up smiling and having fun. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Because you can really find the fun in just about anything.
Yeah.
Ama, thank you so much. I so appreciate spending the time with us. And today is just great. And I can't wait to talk with you again.
Likewise. Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining in today on the You've Got Nurse Series podcast. I appreciate your time as our time is our most precious commodity. We never get the time back. Using our time intentionally and with purpose makes a difference. Kindly like and share if you find this content helpful. I invite you to explore a bit more of the work, which you can find on my websites of you'vegotnurse.org and theartofselfcraftsmanship.org. It will be my pleasure to hear from you with any questions you may have. Take good care of you and your ultimate mind diet in the meantime.